And one other thing that often works is having someone else explain it, whether it's like mom's been doing it and now you have dad, or Zoom Uncle Mike or whoever. It's actually interesting to me sometimes just having a different person with a different voice. And you could say, I said that exact thing, but sometimes it clicks, just like having somebody else say it. They just needed to hear it in a different way.
Welcome to the show called Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. This is the show where we talk about everything homeschooling, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We want to encourage and affirm you in the decision to homeschool, challenge and inspire you to take it to new heights, and celebrate everything you get to experience along the way in this adventure of a lifetime. Today's show is titled Exploring Creation with Math, and we have a special guest with us, author Kathryn Gomes, author of the Exploring Creation with Math series. There's 5 in the series, and so I want to welcome Kathryn to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Davis. Thanks for having me.
Great. So real quick, before we get into the actual math topic that we want to talk about today, remind folks a little bit about your background, your family, your homeschool experience, and just give that initial teaser to the math curriculum that is now complete.
Sure. So I was homeschooled K through 12, really enjoyed it. And now I'm a second generation homeschooler. I have 3 kids that I'm homeschooling along with my husband, Jason. And I've written the Apologia math series that now has 6 levels for elementary. And so we're just thrilled that, level 6 is coming out and people can experience sort of the whole series. It was a real joy for me to write that series because I love math. I love helping homeschool families. So it's kind of like my dream job.
So the number 6 is coming out right now, and you have 3 kids, but what are their ages now? And I assume it was 6 years ago, or was it longer than that you started working on this series?
Yeah, so my oldest is 9, my middle one is 7, and my youngest is 5. I'm trying to remember, I think 8 years ago. I mean, there was like the planning stage, and then I started writing. But I did have my youngest right around when I started level 3. So she's kind of in the middle of the series. But she got the level 3 book dedicated to her, so,
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome. So I assume your kids use this math curriculum.
Yes, they do. They love it. They do give me feedback, which is really funny, on things like, oh, you should have made this coloring page different or whatever. But my oldest is in level 4, probably about to start level 5. And then my middle one is in level 2. And my littlest one will be starting in a few years. So
Well, that is awesome. Rachel and I just did a show on our podcast, the Let's Talk Homeschool podcast, this very show. And we said, we wish we would have had this curriculum when our kids were in elementary school. But I'm really glad to hear your kids are getting to enjoy it. So math is not necessarily everybody's favorite subject. It can be a difficult subject, even in those elementary years. So I assume you hear that there are some challenges that families face when it comes to teaching math or picking a math curriculum. What are the things you're hearing on the challenge front when it comes to math?
Yeah, I definitely hear about challenges. I think that, there's lots of areas that can be challenging for homeschool families, but math often rises to the top. And, I'm pretty active on social media, on Instagram and on Facebook. So I'll have families just message me, help, or today I was at homeschool co-op and in the lobby, moms will just grab me and like, what do we do? And even I was just laughing. We were at like homeschool ice skating day or whatever. And someone skated over to me. I got to talk to you about math. So I feel like I hear a lot of the challenges. And I do think that helps me because I hear from so many families that I kind of know the common areas. So I think one thing that can be a little bit alienating as a homeschool family is if you don't realize lots of kids struggle with this or lots of families hit a roadblock here. This is very common. It can make you feel just a little better about it. And so I think it can be helpful for me to just have that pulse on the homeschool community of where these common pitfalls are.
So when you were putting this curriculum together, I know you had some families involved, kind of like a focus group, to get some feedback and to perfect this and work out some of the bugs. Is that one of the times where you saw some of those challenges and figured out ways to help make them less challenging?
For sure. Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up those families, because I think that I didn't realize when we decided to do that how integral that was going to be. I think we thought it was important, but as we've kind of finished this series, I feel like it just was crucial. So just so listeners kind of understand, what would happen is I would draft the lessons, and then we had homeschool families work through the entire book, every lesson, every activity. They took a lot of the photos for us, and they also gave me feedback on every single lesson. And there were two sets of questions. What did the parent think, and what did the children think? And that was really helpful, just to hear directly from kids, directly from parents, on how it was working. One year, one of the families moved, and so the mom was telling me, we didn't get to this and we couldn't find this was too involved because we were moving. And the other family had a baby, and they were kind of struggling, and both were making excuses. And I was kind of saying, I think this is great that I'm getting feedback, because this is homeschool life, right?
That's
Homeschool
right.
families move, homeschool families have babies. And so I think it kept the program really grounded in sort of the day in, day out of what homeschooling is like.
So, for those kind of families, like you say, when you're starting homeschooling, or you have elementary aged kids, there's a lot of other things happening in the family. You can be having more kids. It can be possibly a relocation. It can be all kinds of things that can interrupt the school year, or make things a little bit more difficult to stay on track and to keep things moving along. So how does that work for a homeschool family when they're finding math, a little harder to figure out, to pick the right curriculum, or to just help their kids understand it and learn it and enjoy it? What are some of the things you would suggest to families to overcome some of those issues?
Yeah, I think that, every subject is different. And some subjects like history and literature, you can be a little more sporadic, and your child's not going to feel that difference. But I think with math, and there's a couple other subjects, you're probably learning to read is like this, consistency makes a huge difference. It's a lot like exercising. I'm a runner, and if I go 2 weeks without running, it's as if I never ran before, and you lose all the ground. Math can be like that, where if you go too many days without having your child work on it, they lose a lot of ground. But like you said, a lot of times as homeschoolers, we love our flexibility, we love our field trip days, and we're a family, so there's naturally disruptions. So I think that first, just keeping in mind, of all the subjects that you have on your plate as a parent to teach, math is definitely one of them where consistency should be a priority. And if you have to let something slide, try not to let it be math, just because of the type of content matter it is and how kids learn. It really deserves to be a priority of like, okay, we can only do one quick thing before we head out to do this, really great thing or whatever. We're going to do math. I mean, obviously I'm a little biased towards math, but I think it's just part of how kids are wired to learn. And then the other thing, just to encourage you, is when you do lose ground, or something happens, you have some sickness in the family, or you had another baby, or something pretty disruptive happens, kids are wired to learn, forget, and relearn. So it doesn't need to be like the end all of everything, like, oh, they lost ground. You can just review it. I've seen families be so creative in how they look at, okay, we had sort of a disruptive January, but we can go a little longer into the summer. We can start a little early next year. You can get creative because you have that flexibility.
Well, right. And as you were talking about the way math can be easily forgotten, it made me think of my own school years, where you take summer vacation, you come back
Right.
in the fall, and that was a very common issue that teachers faced is, and even as a student, you tend to forget what you learned in the summer, especially the math. And so that review was very important to kind of get back up to speed. And I was a student who really enjoyed math and thrived in it, but I still needed that quick review to get going. And it also made me think of our own homeschool. we had different schedules throughout the years. There were some years that we did 6 weeks on and 1 week off, 6 weeks on and 1 week off. And we would actually do that through the summer. And we really enjoyed those years because we were always doing school, but that gave us a consistent break with, a light at the end of the tunnel that mom could see every 6 weeks. But then there were other years where we did a more traditional school year and took, 2 or 3 months off in the summer. And sure enough, we would see exactly what you talked about. There was that tendency to forget some of the things we covered at the end of the year and would have to do a little bit more review. So that, as a homeschool parent, you got the flexibility to adjust the schedule, to do 5 minutes of math before you head out, just to keep it consistent, like you're saying.
For sure. I mean, there's so many ways you can be creative. And I loved how you said that, like, you did the 6 weeks, 1 week off, but other times you did the full summer off. You can just kind of adjust as you go.
So, one of the things that people always ask themselves when they're homeschooling is, I can't teach that subject because I'm better in English and history, but math and science maybe isn't your forte. So what would you say to the homeschool mom or dad who wants to homeschool? They see the benefits of homeschooling for their family, but math just isn't their wheelhouse, where they even feel weak, even potentially in elementary math. So what would you say to encourage and to help and to show that parent that they can actually do this and do justice for their kids' education when it comes to the elementary math in particular?
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that because I get that question or concern a lot. I think sometimes parents, they don't like math. I like math, but you won't hurt my feelings. There's a lot of parents who've told me they don't like math. And so they're not really thrilled about teaching it to their kids, or they do feel a lack of confidence maybe in themselves in math, or they didn't have this great experience learning math, and now they're teaching their child. I think the first thing that's kind of a misconception I'd like to clear up is the skill of doing math or being a mathematician is separate from the skill of being able to explain math and teach math. And even like for myself, I love math, but what I really love is teaching it and explaining it. And I think those are very separate. You don't necessarily, the person who's the best at doing math is not often the best at explaining it. So even if you had struggles or you can relate to that feeling of being lost and frustrated, that can actually help you be a more empathetic teacher of math. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that prevents you from being a good math teacher. I think the other thing is, in the homeschool community, you're looking for a curriculum that doesn't just teach your child math, but it also coaches you on how to come alongside of them. That's what a good program should look like. In Apologia Math, that's our answer key teaching guide, where I just put all my messages to you, the parent, like, here's how you want to teach long division. This is why we're doing this way, sort of my side blurbs of like, this is why this is, because homeschool parents, that's what you need to be equipped. And so I don't think you don't need to disqualify yourself if you're nervous about math, because you should have a program that's preparing you, and you'll be able to kind of come alongside them, right? Even if you're saying, I remember this being hard for me, that can help as well.
So now, let's go to the student. So this is probably the first time a student is learning addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and other math concepts. When an elementary age student gets stuck in math and it's just not making sense, the dots aren't connecting, and they're frustrated. You as a parent, you're probably frustrated. You've tried different angles to help them understand, and it's just not working. You're just not breaking through. What's your advice in that situation? Should you just keep plugging at it, pounding, and trying to figure this out and reviewing, or should you move on, cover some new subjects, and then come back to that later? What are some of the best approaches that you've seen when that happens?
Sure. So I think there can kind of be two situations. One where a child just kind of says like they hate math in general. We'll put them in one category. But then the one I want to address here is like there's a specific topic where they're stuck. You were doing okay, and then suddenly they don't get it, and you've told them 3 different times. So First of all, I think it's really common. And I think one thing that helps me that I just want to share with parents is that I know these common areas that happen again and again. Multiplication and division facts is often one for kids. Fractions, like I feel like fractions, one group of kids are just like they get it the first time, and the other kids are totally lost. And you've got measuring cups out and fraction bars, and you're like cutting an apple, and they're just like, I don't get it. And then negative numbers. I'm working with negative numbers right now in my co-op class, and it's really hard for a lot of kids. And then of course X, right? Variables. Those tend to be just some common points where the leap can feel very steep for kids, and they just can't. Suddenly they're lost. It was all making sense. So that's the first thing, is just know it's pretty common for kids to hit a roadblock. I think that if you're both really frustrated, you might need to take a step back. Like if it's feeling you're frustrated, they're not understanding it, they're feeling frustrated, you want to both kind of just get a little bit of an emotional break from it, because it can just get into like sort of a vicious cycle. And then there's a couple things you can do. You can move on, right? Like you can say, we're going to move to the next chapter and come back to this. Sometimes that is a really good fix if just the emotions are really high. And I've seen it where it's like we go on to geometry and then we circle back to the fractions and they get it. And you're like, they just needed a little break, or I don't know. The other thing is you can just try a different approach. In Apologia Math, I try to show multiple approaches so a kid can latch on to it in the way that makes sense to them. So if we're doing fractions, we have number lines, we have fraction tiles, we have pictures, we have food as much as possible. And one of those is probably going to help them. So if you've kind of been showing it one way, give them a different perspective. And one other thing that often works is having someone else explain it. Whether it's like mom's been doing it and now you have dad, or you Zoom Uncle Mike or whoever. It's actually interesting to me sometimes just having a different person with a different voice. And you could say, I said that exact thing, but sometimes it clicks, just like having somebody else say it. They just needed to hear it in a different way. So those are my suggestions on that.
No, that is so true. Whether it's elementary age kids or teenagers, sometimes you don't get the credit for what you said first. You said just the same way, but
right.
You thank God that they finally heard
right.
it from somebody.
Right.
And it also sounds like homeschool families could have a great opportunity to eat lots of pizza and cut
Absolutely.
those pizza pies up.
It can be fruit, Davis. It doesn't have to be pizza.
That's true. Eat healthy, folks.
Pie, but it can be fruit, or it can be granola bars.
Well, here's what we're going to do, folks. This podcast is obviously going to be sponsored specifically by the Apologia Math curriculum. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it while Kathryn puts together some last thoughts that she'd like to share with us when we wrap up this show. So, folks, homeschooling moms have been raving about Apologia's Exploring Creation with Mathematics curriculum, calling it a total game changer. With hands-on math activities and games, short 30-minute lessons, an open and go format, and a suggested 4-week schedule, you and your children will love Apologia's math curriculum. One mom said, I think I finally found it. I've been searching for years for the perfect math curriculum, something hands-on that has short lessons, has everything laid out in an easy-to-use parent manual for me. Apologia knocked it out of the park with this one. So many homeschool families have switched to Apologia Math after struggling with other curricular choices and have seen their children become excited about math for the first time. Visit apologia.com/math today and discover why so many homeschooling families are switching to Apologia Math. Well, that was fun reading that. And folks, you do need to go to apologia.com/math. Check out all the information there, see some samples, hear from Kathryn on the website. She's going to be very active and available this year to explain, share, and show and tell everything about this math series that has 6 levels, level 1 through 6. They're all available this year. So check it out at a conference, online, wherever you look for homeschool curriculum. So, Kathryn, we are nearing the end of the show, so I want to give you a chance to share anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to folks to know about teaching math, about homeschooling, about the Exploring Creation with Math series that you authored. What are the last golden nuggets that you want to share with folks today?
Okay. Yeah, I just was going to end by saying I think one of the most important steps you can take is just by sharing your struggles in community. So if you have a co-op or you have, interaction in person with homeschoolers, it can just make you feel 100% better if you just say out loud, we are so stuck on division facts, or I can't believe how long we've been doing long division, or these things. To have somebody else say, oh, us too, can really just make you feel 100% better. And if you don't have that in-person community, or if you just want to follow up, I think social media can be a great place to connect. I would love to connect with our listeners. I'm Kathryn M. Gomes on Facebook. That's my professional page. And I'm Homeschool Math Mom on Instagram. I love hearing from families because, I want to help you if you're having any challenges, but also it makes me a better curriculum writer if I'm hearing, just from homeschool families about how things are going. So hope that was helpful.
What's the Instagram handle again?
Homeschool Math Mom.
Homeschool Math Mom. I love that. Great one there. All right, folks. Well, it's time to bring this conversation to a close. Thanks for listening. We're going to do another show with Kathryn later this year. So thank you again for listening, and thanks for watching. We hope you'll join us next time. This is Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries, and I've been your host, Davis, with our guest, Kathryn Gomes. Have a great day, and until next time, we are walking by faith and enjoying the homeschooling adventure of a lifetime.